Looking here, we have topic 5. This is an extension that only is relevant to New York State. We'll be looking at both the male and female reproductive systems and seeing how those are both responsible for the continuity of life. First up, we've got the female reproductive system. First thing I always like to do is go and label the diagram so that I know all of the parts. A is pointing to the ovary. B is pointing to the fallopian tube. C is the uterus. And then D, which I don't know if you'll see any questions on, that's going to be the vagina. First up, over here in this chart, I also wrote down what the functions of all of these different parts are. So the ovary, notice the redundancy, meaning that there are 2 of them. That's important in case one of them is damaged. You still would be able to reproduce. Ovary produces gametes. Gametes could also be referred to as eggs in this case. Another thing is that it makes hormones. Hormones are chemical messengers that get released. This hormone, you could see a variety of them. On the next page, I go over a few. But the main female hormone would be estrogen. You also could see progesterone. Those are both going to be produced by the ovary. It's also possible that you would see ones that are produced by the pituitary gland, which are FSH and LH. I think those would most likely be on a chart that you would have to analyze. Next up, we've got fallopian tube. When I see fallopian tube, I think fertilization. Keep in mind for humans, that is internal fertilization. That just means that the sperm and egg meet inside of the female. So over here, we've got sperm and egg meet, and that is going to make a fertilized egg. Fertilized egg is also known as a zygote. That fertilized egg travels down the fallopian tube and then is going to implant itself into the uterine lining. The uterine lining is for internal development of the embryo and the fetus. Keep in mind that when the embryo and fetus are here, it is undergoing mitosis, and eventually it's undergoing differentiation. Both of these will be further looked at on the next page. The last part of the female reproductive system is the vagina, and that is responsible for receiving the sperm. So let's say fertilization does occur, and then implantation of the embryo occurs into the uterine lining. Then you have, it goes zygote, embryo, fetus. As this is all happening, we have the development of something called the placenta. This structure here is the placenta. It is also attached to the uterine wall. And it's responsible for allowing materials like oxygen, carbon dioxide, and nutrients to diffuse between the mother and the fetus. Now keep in mind, where this fetus is developing, this whole structure, that's the uterus. Down here is the cervix. When someone is not in labor, it is going to be closed up. When someone is in labor, this is going to be what dilates and allows for the birth of the child. Over here we have that word diffusion. We saw that earlier. Diffusion is referring to the movement of molecules from high to low. If I was to draw a picture, again, as I've already said, not necessarily the best artist. Keep that in mind. We're going to pretend that this is our blood flow. We will say that this one is the fetal blood supply. The blue one is going to be mom's blood supply. When I look here, they are very, very close. Notice they are not actually touching. When I say diffusion, it's because the membranes between them are so thin that it's going to allow molecules to move from the mother's blood to the fetus's blood. And this is all happening inside of this placenta. So there's a maternal side, the mom side, and then there's also a fetal side. The blood vessels, very, very close, almost, but not touching. You don't want mixing of blood, because if there was mixing of blood and there was different blood types, that would be problematic and result in death. How does the blood flow go? The mother provides the oxygen and the glucose to the fetus. So oxygen and glucose diffuse from the mother's blood to the fetus's blood. On the other side, we have the fetus, and the fetus needs to get rid of wastes. What types of waste? Carbon dioxide, and whatever other wastes are building up. This, when it moves without applying any energy and just happens, is called diffusion. And again, these two blood supplies do not actually mix. Moving on to the male reproductive system. Again, always sit there, label the parts. Testes, testicle. F is the vas deferens. And then over here, H is the penis. Keep in mind that when we're writing, if we have to ever identify the parts on the test, on the Regents, we have to use the word, like the technical terms. You can't use slang words that you've used with your friends. You have to use the actual words that they are called. Keep that in mind. Testes is production of gametes, also hormones. For male, the main hormone is testosterone. Vas deferens transports the sperm from the testes to the urethra. So this tube right here, that's the urethra. And then the penis is responsible for transporting the sperm into the female reproductive system for internal fertilization. The menstrual cycle is regulated. That word regulated means controlled by hormones. I have just 2 hormones listed here. Might they give you other hormones? Yes. Might they not even talk about hormones? Also, yes. The 2 hormones I have listed here are estrogen and progesterone. What's going on in this picture? First of all, this is what's happening in the ovary. Remember, the ovary is where the egg is. Females are born with all the eggs they're ever going to have. Each month, once a woman goes through puberty, 1 egg matures. That's what's happening during this process. So we have an egg and a follicle. The egg matures inside of the follicle, and then you ovulate. Ovulation is when a mature egg is released. From ovary into fallopian tube. So that's what I have here. This egg is now going into the fallopian tube. That means that during this time, around day 14, since the egg is in the fallopian tube right around that time, right, this is when someone's going to be the most fertile. meaning fertilization is likely to happen because around day 14, and remember, this is like an estimate, not every single person is day 14, but around day 14, that's going to be when the egg gets released or when the female ovulates. The last part of this is looking at the uterus. The uterus develops a lining each month. What you'll notice is on day 0 to 4, that's going to be when the person is menstruating, so therefore they are losing that uterine lining. But then around day 4, that's going to represent the thickening of the lining. You need a thick uterine lining because that is going to be where the fertilized egg implants. If you wind up not getting pregnant around day 28, the woman gets her period and menstruates, and then that uterine lining gets thin again, and then the whole process starts over. What's controlling this thickening and this egg releasing? It's these hormones. Over here we have embryonic development. I took this picture from one of the most recent Regents exams. Looking over here, it gives me all process X, process Y, process Z. As always, label what's going on. When I see process X, I see sperm and egg coming together. So I know when sperm and egg come together, that's fertilization. It might also be beneficial to make sure that you write down what the cells are. I mean, cell A is obviously sperm. Cell B, this is an egg. Over here, this is a new single cell. This single cell has a full and complete set of chromosomes. Remember, the sperm and the egg have half the normal number because they were produced by a process known as meiosis. And if you didn't watch the other video, meiosis is the process that makes sex cells, and sex cells or gametes have half the normal number of chromosomes. So now I have a zygote, which is my single new cell. This one here has the full and complete set of chromosomes. All the chromosomes that you need to make a person. That cell makes 2 cells, 2 identical cells. Then we've got 2 more identical cells, and that process continues forever and ever. This process Y, process Y, process Y, process Y, process Y, the whole time. Process Y is mitosis. So all of those, mitosis, and then down here, mitosis. When I think mitosis, what I tell my students to do is I'm making 2 identical cells. So this that starts off here has a certain number of chromosomes, 46. It divides. Each one of these new cells have 46 chromosomes. Each one of these have the same 46 chromosomes, same 46 chromosomes, same 46 chromosomes. This here, this human, every cell, except for sperm or egg, have the same 46 chromosomes. Same 46 chromosomes. So mitosis happens forever. And keep in mind, mitosis is responsible for both growth and repair. So as you age and you grow, all of your cells are undergoing mitosis, and then you get a cut. How do you repair that? Mitosis. The last part that we're looking at is I will see here it talks about a new process. This is going to be process Z. Keep in mind, mitosis is still going on. Process Z, though, I can see now I've got a nerve cell, a liver cell, intestinal, and cheek cell. Here, you're just a clump of cells. You have unlimited potential. Those cells can become anything. Process Z, so all of these, that's known as differentiation. And differentiation is when cells get their different jobs. You get different jobs because different genes are activated. Now keep in mind, every cell in your body, no matter what its job is, has the same exact DNA. Differentiation is the process by which different genes in the same code, right? All the cells have the same exact genetic code. Different genes get turned on, activated, or expressed, like a little light switch. So over here I have more of what it is, cell A and B. I would just note sperm and egg are formed by meiosis. Process X is fertilization. You restore the chromosome number during fertilization. So now that zygote has the 2N, the complete set. Then we've got mitosis, makes two identical cells. That goes on forever and ever and ever until you die. Process Z is differentiation, and that's when those cells get their different jobs. Even though they all have the same instruction manual, only certain parts of the manual or certain genes are turned on. The last part of this is talking about factors that could affect embryonic or fetal development. You got alcohol and smoking. Both are bad for the fetus. We've got diet and exercise. There are certain foods like you should avoid when you're pregnant. One would be cold cuts because you have an increased risk of eating them. And if you're exposed to listeria, which is a bacteria, that might not have an effect on the adult, but on the fetus, it does have a negative effect. There are certain drugs that you can't take, even over-the-counter medicines like ibuprofen, Advil. You can't take those. Even regular things that you might be prescribed when you're pregnant, you're not allowed to take those. Exposure to environmental toxins, that could be pollution, it could be contamination in the water. All of those things might lead to fetal development not happening properly. So once again, if you have any questions, let me know, and I will do my best to answer them.